Okay, welcome to video number 7 on the judgment and the resurrection, the final judgment that is. And I'm here with Q, Mike, and myself, and we're just going to go an in-depth Bible study on these two topics and really what the Bible has to say on the judgment and resurrection. So Q, we're going to start off with you. How would you explain the final judgment in the Bible? What passages come to mind, and how would you sum that up?
All right, well, in my words, the final judgment was on the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and pretty much all who persecuted Jesus and his men who tried to spread the gospel message. And with that, let's begin with Jesus sending out his disciples in Matthew 10. You see the mission in verse 6 through 8, where he says, go to the lost sheep of Israel, literal sheep, and pastors. No. He's talking about lost sheep who are not aware of the upcoming judgment and resurrection, the people who don't even know God's redemptive plan through Jesus. So go to these lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. It'll no longer be this temporary holding cell of purgatory or Hades, the concept where you go when you physically die. The gates are about to be opened up for man for the first time. And you can imagine how monumental this was for people who were waiting, by the words of the prophet Daniel in Daniel 12, for their Messiah to bring entrance to eternal life. So the hope of Israel is about to come to fruition. Back to verse 8, he tells them to heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons, perform these works and miracles in my name, because what you see Jesus doing throughout the Gospels, performing miracles and healing his believers along the way, it's kind of to build faith and create hope and all that. But then he kind of warns them it's not all going to be sunshine and roses. He tells them that in the beginning, verse 16, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Literal sheep and wolves? No, innocent grazing sheep among bloodthirsty, ravenous wolves, the people proclaiming the new way of the faith promised to them against the followers of the old way who refuse to give up the things that are prolonging their spiritual death. So he tells them in Matthew 10, 17 to 18, he tells them, but beware, for you will be handed over to the courts and be flogged with whips in the synagogues. You'll stand trial before governors and kings because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell the rulers and the other believers about me. So he continues with the warnings in the 21st verse through the 23rd verse. And some will listen, but most will argue. They'll try to harm you, this, that, and the other. They clearly won't like the message being proclaimed. But as always, he offers them hope. He tells them not to be too bothered because pretty much he's sending them out as heralds to tell the message, hey, guess what? He's coming to bring judgment on these people. So when you're standing there at the shootout or whatnot, don't be afraid. Like, the backup's coming. So you see the judgment about to come on these people. Like, it's obvious that it's these people that they're talking about. So verse 23 says, at the end, truly I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That's pretty straightforward. So skip through to Matthew 23, 13 to 14. Jesus lets the Pharisees know exactly where they stand. He says, woe to you. He begins just like that. So he already sent his men out. They're already going through the things that he said that they were going through. And now he's talking to the Pharisees. 23, 13 to 14. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves, and you won't let others there either. He keeps telling them over and over again. There's 7 sorrows. He keeps telling them, "Woe unto you, you Pharisees, you teachers of the law, you hypocrites!" He calls them hypocrites 4 separate times. So he lists all the woes. Basically, you're going to pay for your transgressions against me and my people. So he calls them blind fools, telling them about the ridiculous rituals that they do in the temple in a way that undermines the original intent of those laws. But either way, he sums it up in 33. And he's telling them exactly what he's told his disciples would happen. So you go to Matthew 23, 39, and let's see. He says, for I tell you this, you will never see me again until you say blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. That kind of sums up the end of this passage that he's telling all these Pharisees about the stuff that's going to happen to him. And that segues right into Matthew 24, where he's with his disciples and they ask him, all that stuff that you were telling them about the Pharisees about what's about to happen to them, how will we know when that comes? What will be the sign of your coming for that judgment on these people? So, I mean, it's pretty clear to me that the judgment was referring to the judgment on the Pharisees. So that's what I got for that.
All right.
Michael, anything to add?
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback that. You know, we're talking about the Gospel of Matthew, and you see from the minute Jesus, the Messiah that the Old Testament prophecies spoke about, the minute he gets on the scene, he's going to get baptized by John the Baptist, and John the Baptist is already yelling at the religious people. He tells them, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" You know, so right on the scene, he's already yelling at these religious people. And then Jesus, he sends his disciples out to preach to the lost, you know, to go to all the house of Israel. And he tells them that, you know, judgment's going to come upon those that dismiss you. That house that you enter into, that man of peace that does not accept you, dust off your feet, because it will be worse for that city than it was for Sodom and Gomorrah. And he just tells them to go. Then you continually see that those who reject the miracles, as Q said, those people would be judged. Then you see in Matthew 12, you have the religious people ask for a sign. And Jesus says, "You will not be given a sign, you wicked and adulterous generation. The only sign given you will be the sign of Jonah," which would be Jesus Christ going into the earth and Jesus Christ coming out of the earth as a physical man to show a sign to them. Then in Matthew 23 to 25, you basically have Jesus screaming at the Pharisees and the Sadducees and these religious people and telling them what the end is going to look like, what this final judgment, this whole thing is going to be, how the whole thing is going to complete. And the 2 key points, or 3 key points for that matter, what you see is you see Jesus saying, those who killed the prophets, that's who judgment is going to come upon. And also, you see that he says, those who pierce the Son will mourn. You remember Jesus saying that you will not see me again until you say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Then when you read the Old Testament prophecies in Zechariah about how those who pierce the Son will mourn, you'll see that that was the time that they would say that the grace would come upon the house of David, that they would realize that this was the judgment from God. And in the book of Revelation, which sums the whole judgment up, the book of Revelation is speaking about, in parabolic language, of the judgment, and he says, the city where the Lord was crucified. That's the city of all the judgment that is spoken of in Revelation. And you see a direct parallel if you read Jeremiah's prophecy in the book of Lamentations. So all of this sums up in one main parable of Jesus, and it's the parable of the tenants. It says that the owner of this land, he will send his servants to these people, and he will keep sending them. They will keep killing the servants. They will keep killing the servants. Finally, he will send his son, because he says, "They will not kill my son." And then they do kill his son. And the words of that parable says, what do you think the owner of that land will do when they kill his son? What will be the judgment? So that's basically what we're faced with here. And then the next thing, what this is going to lead up to, is the resurrection. And now, James, that's where I pose the question to you. You know, what does the Bible say about resurrection?